In the heart of South America, an unprecedented giant on the global stage once danced to the rhythm of prosperity until the 21st century. Imagine a country bursting with promise, once poised to be a global powerhouse. That was Venezuela, a nation adorned with oil riches, its people basking in the glow of economic promise. But our story takes a twist as Venezuela found itself at the crossroads of what could have been and the stark reality of its unraveling. How did Venezuela's dreams of becoming a superpower turn into a struggle for survival? As we step back in time to unravel Venezuela's journey, it's crucial to understand the intricate threads that weave its history. The 15th century marked the inception of Spanish influence, a chapter where ambitious explorers, lured by the allure of newfound territories, set foot on Venezuelan soil. Little did they know that this encounter would set in motion a series of events that would shape the fate of a nation. The Spanish expedition to Venezuela began with the arrival of Christopher Columbus during his third voyage to the Americas. Columbus first set foot on the Venezuelan coast on August 1, 1498. However, it wasn't until the early 16th century that more significant exploration and colonization efforts took place. When the Spanish explorers such as Alonso de Ojeda and Amerigo Vespucci set foot on the shores of Venezuela in the 1500s, it was like the start of an epic adventure. The land was dripping with promise, and everyone had stars in their eyes. The Spanish thinking of gold, and the locals hoping for a bright future. But oh, the plot thickened. The Spanish weren't just there for a casual visit. They were driven by the trinity of God, glory, and gold. As in the words of those early adventurers, the quest was succinctly summarized. In the pursuit of riches, fame, and the spread of Christianity, we sailed into the unknown lands, echoing the spirit of their exploration. The Spanish, driven by their fervor for wealth and resources, embarked on a colonization mission that unfolded over centuries. The exploitation of Venezuela's abundant resources left an indelible mark on the land and its indigenous populations. Cities like El Tocuyo and Coro, born from Spanish aspirations, became nodes in a vast web of colonization. Fast forward to the 18th century. Venezuela found itself under the mantle of the Captaincy General of Venezuela, a testament to the enduring Spanish influence. The quest for valuable resources, primarily gold, turned the region into a focal point of Spanish aspirations. The echoes of the Spanish era resonated through the corridors of time, ultimately setting the stage for Venezuela's pursuit of independence. The Enlightenment ideals that swept through Europe and the successes of neighboring nations' independence movements cast a spark on the hearts of Venezuelans. In 1811, the Proclamation of Independence ignited the flame of liberty, challenging the long-standing Spanish rule. The struggle for freedom, fueled by the vision of luminaries like Simón Bolívar, resulted in Venezuela breaking the shackles of Spanish dominion in 1821. The canvas of Venezuelan history painted during the Spanish rule laid the foundation for a narrative that would later intertwine with the discovery of oil, marking a critical juncture in the nation's fate. Fast forward to the early 20th century. In the days before the oil frenzy, Venezuela danced to the rhythm of its agrarian economy. The fields stretched wide with crops, and the backbone of the economy was not black gold, but the earth itself. President Juan Vicente Gómez, ruling with an iron fist in the early 1900s, presided over this agrarian landscape. The fields were painted with cacao plantations, coffee farms, and cattle ranches, shaping Venezuela's economic canvas. Cacao, the magic bean behind chocolate, was the headliner. Venezuela was a cacao heavyweight, and its beans were like the VIPs of the global market. Coffee was also in the mix, with Venezuelan coffee getting a thumbs up for its quality. Livestock farming was also a cornerstone, playing a dual role in satisfying local consumption needs and contributing to international trade as Venezuelan cowboys skillfully guided herds across the vast plains. But hold on, it wasn't all rosy. While these industries were booming, there was an underbelly of inequality. Land ownership was concentrated in the hands of a few, leaving many struggling for a plot of their own. Like a fragile seedling in the ever-shifting winds, Venezuela's agrarian economy faced storms of fluctuating commodity prices. Its ambitions for growth were often trampled by the footprints of global economic conditions. To illuminate the struggle, Gómez expressed what many felt: in the furrows of our fields, we sought prosperity, but the harvest eluded our grasp. Then came the mid-20th century, and the wind of change began to whisper. Leaders like Rómulo Betancourt wanted to shake things up. He aimed to break the chains of inequality. Agrarian reforms were set in motion, attempting to redistribute land and empower small farmers. Yet, even with these changes, the economic struggle persisted. The road to prosperity proved challenging. The struggle for economic stability continued, with hurdles ranging from resistance to change to unforeseen complications in the implementation of reforms. In the shadows of poverty and with limited industrial dreams, Venezuela stood at a crossroads. Little did it know, a liquid treasure lay beneath its feet, ready to rewrite the story of a nation. And then, bam, oil happened. The black gold rush transformed Venezuela's economic scripts, but the echoes of its agrarian past lingered in the soil, reminding the nation of a time when the earth, not oil wells, bore the weight of its economic dreams. In the early 1900s, Venezuela stumbled upon a game-changer, black gold, known as oil, a treasure buried in the heart of Maracaibo. The discovery of oil in Venezuela marked a tremendous shift in the country's fortunes, catapulting Venezuela onto the global stage of oil production, setting the scene for an epic transformation. Initially, as the first drops of oil were extracted, a cautious optimism swept through Venezuela. A country primarily reliant on agriculture suddenly found itself on the brink of a transformative change. The first major oil well, Zumaque 1, showed up in 1914 thanks to the Venezuelan Oil Concessions, or VOC. This served as the starting point for Venezuela's oil journey. The real transformation unfolded in the 1920s when oil production gained momentum. This era witnessed major players in the oil industry, including Shell, Standard Oil, and Gulf Oil, stepping onto the scene, making lucrative deals with the Venezuelan government. By 1929, Venezuela proudly wore the badge of the world's second-largest oil exporter, riding high on the global demand for petroleum like a triumphant monarch. The impact of this newfound oil wealth on Venezuela and its people was profound. Economically, the nation experienced a substantial boost as oil revenues poured in, resulting in Venezuela having a higher per capita GDP than both Spain and Greece. This influx of money enabled the government to invest in infrastructure, education, and public services. Modernization initiatives such as the constructions of roads, schools, and hospitals, sculpting a new landscape with a magic wand of prosperity. To quote the era, "From oil wells, prosperity wells forth." On the global stage, Venezuela's status as a major oil exporter elevated its position in international affairs. The country emerged as a powerhouse and became a key player in global energy markets, wielding influence and forging diplomatic ties with other nations. For Venezuelans, this oil boom meant better living. Jobs popped up in the growing oil industry, providing work for more people. The newfound wealth also helped create a middle class, giving more access to education, healthcare, and things to buy. This translated into improved living standards for many. Venezuela didn't just discover oil, it found a ticket to global prominence. Oil was the golden key, unlocking doors to economic prosperity and international influence. However, behind this success story lurked challenges, a reminder that fortune comes with complexities. In the late 1980s, Caracas became a powder keg of protest and discontent as Venezuela, once the wealthiest nation in Latin America and a superpower in the making, faced a tremendous shift. The trigger? Plummeting oil prices. Imagine a country with the most oil globally, capable of meeting the US demand for 40 years, yet they ran out of basic things like toilet paper. Hotels even had to ask guests to bring their own. With shortages of rice, sugar, milk, and shampoo, plus frequent power cuts, 30 million people struggled just to get by without these basic essentials. In Venezuela, cars don't lose their value much. You can buy one, use it for several years, and sell it for the same price. Gas is incredibly cheap, costing just over 6 cents a gallon, allowing you to fill up your tank for less than $1. Banks there even give loans for plastic surgery. Surprisingly, taxi drivers make more money than doctors. That's why many migrants from Venezuela are doctors, lawyers, and professors. Venezuela, once the wealthiest nation in Latin America, is facing the most severe economic crisis during peacetime in modern history. Within a year, a third of its economy vanished, a scale comparable to Ukraine's situation in 2022. Over 7 million people, constituting a quarter of the population, have left the country. This crisis mirrors elements of the Great Depression, Zimbabwe's hyperinflation, and the Syrian migrant crisis simultaneously, all occurring in a country with an abundant 300 billion barrels of oil, 11 times more than China and almost 4 times that of Russia. Despite its vast oil wealth, Venezuela's condition has drastically worsened, prompting the question, how did things go so terribly wrong? The historical context reveals prosperous periods, such as in 1970 when Venezuela had a higher per capita GDP than Spain or Greece, and during China's rise in the early 2000s, leading to an influx of wealth. Yet, these highs contrast sharply with lows, aggravated by the absence of savings for rainy days, a recurring issue in the oil business. As oil revenues continued to dwindle, the Venezuelan government, led by President Carlos Andrés Perez, attempted to implement reforms to stabilize the situation to prevent itself from drowning in debt. In a bid for International Monetary Fund assistance, the government embraced neoliberal policies, slashing social programs, removing price controls, and privatizing state-owned companies. The medicine administered was supposed to make the economy more efficient, but as events unfolded, proved to be a bitter pill. When subsidies for gas were cut, bus fares surged, triggering widespread protests in 1989. But who could have predicted that the very substance that fueled Venezuela's prosperity would also ignite a crisis that echoed through the streets of Caracas? Venezuelans felt betrayed as politicians implemented austerity measures without prior warning. The economic downturn was aggravated by the overvaluation of the Venezuelan bolivar, benefiting the wealthy while stifling domestic growth. When oil prices continue to drop, Venezuela faces a harsh combination: loss of state revenue and increased costs for imports. This cycle, prevalent for centuries, has reached an especially prolonged crisis due to a mix of weak oil prices and U.S. sanctions imposed after manipulated elections. The situation became dire to the extent that the country ran out of funds to pay its international supplier. So, what was the government's solution? Print more money. Since 2007, the Central Bank of Venezuela is no longer independent, giving politicians direct control of the money supply. This led to hyperinflation. Professionals suffered reduced salaries, prompting a significant migration of skilled workers. With dwindling savings value, people resorted to immediate spending and loans for various purchases. Price controls while keeping state-run supermarkets cheap resulted in scarcity, encouraging hoarding and resale. The complex exchange rate system and government control over currency exchange further complicated economic challenges. Politically influenced approval or rejection of currency exchange requests created opportunities for corruption and arbitrage. The big mistake: over-reliance on oil. With oil as virtually its only export, Venezuela suffered when oil prices plummeted. Corruption ran rampant, and wealth failed to reach public funds. Inequality soared, and resentment grew. In the late 1990s, Venezuela was ready for change, and Hugo Chavez, a charismatic leader, took the stage. His election in 1998 wasn't just politics, it marked a big shift. Picture a former military officer challenging a long-standing two-party system, a bit like a rebellion. But hold on. Was this a political change or the start of a major shift in the country's path? Chavez knew how to connect with people's dissatisfaction. He promised a new era for a nation hungry for transformation. Once in power, he played an economic tune of populism. Fueled by rising oil prices, Chavez invested a lot in what he called missions, programs for healthcare, education, and fighting poverty. So, did he really create a compassionate tune that connected, especially with Venezuela's less fortunate? Behind the melody of progress, critics heard some off-key notes. They mentioned nepotism and a lack of administrative finesse in Chavez's time. Was this political performance hitting a few wrong notes? The concentration of power stifled disagreement and cracks appeared. The promises, while lifting some from poverty, didn't establish a strong foundation for long-term stability. Was the plan for progress turning into a mess? After Chavez died in 2013, Nicolás Maduro took over, facing economic storms and public discontent. But did he steer the ship to calmer waters, or did the storm get worse under his command? Instead of fixing the roots of the economic crisis, Maduro's policies seemed to make things worse. Was Maduro following Chavez's economic script, or did he have a completely different plan? In a tragic encore, Maduro stuck to Chavez's reliance on oil revenue, ignoring the need for economic diversification. Nationalizing industries like a misguided overture led to inefficiencies and economic problems. The overvalued currency caused distortions, like a melody of mismanagement. Was Maduro's economic plan a success or a mess? As the composition continued, corruption became a big problem. Profits meant for the public good ended up in the pockets of a few, deepening inequality and creating resentment. Did this financial drama unfold as a tragic story of misplaced priorities and lost opportunities? The metaphorical anchor of their policies weighed heavily on Venezuela, anchoring the nation not to stability, but to the depths of economic despair. In the grand theater of Venezuelan leadership, the actions of leaders like Carlos Andrés Perez, Hugo Chavez, and Nicolás Maduro weren't just political maneuvers, they were a dramatic opera. Instead of steering the nation towards a harmonious future, their policies played a tragic orchestration of runaway inflation, crumbling infrastructure, and a crescendo of a humanitarian crisis. Voters tend to support politicians promising immediate benefits rather than those advocating for foresighted savings. Imagine Venezuela without its heavy reliance on oil and with leaders focused on education and innovation. Venezuela emerges as a potential superpower with a diversified and thriving economy. Picture a Venezuela where leaders prioritize education, innovation, and sustainable industries. The bustling streets of Caracas echo with progress beyond oil, creating a nation of inventors, entrepreneurs, and thinkers. This strategic choice catapults Venezuela into the League of Nations, charting an extraordinary trajectory. Now let's glance at the real-world counterparts: Norway, Iran, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. Norway, with its sovereign wealth fund, stands as a beacon of economic resilience, while Iran, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia have flourished by diversifying their economies. In this fanciful narrative, Venezuela proudly shares the stage with these nations, showcasing a dynamic and diversified economic landscape. In this make-believe comparison, Venezuela, free from the shackles of oil dependency, emerges as a global influencer. The nation fosters advancements in renewable energy, technology, and culture, becoming a shining example of what visionary leadership and economic diversification can achieve. This imaginative journey prompts reflection on the opportunities Venezuela might have had. It leaves us wondering about a thriving Venezuela, standing tall with global leaders, unbound by oil limitations, and driven by the ingenuity of its people and wise leaders.